Hello students, welcome to week 4 for COM 550. This week we are looking at some critical ideas in intercultural and global communication, and particularly related more towards interpersonal communication and how that impacts this area of study. Our week 4 agenda tells us that we're reading chapters 9 and 12 of our course text. We also are watching 3 videos that will help you fully understand the course material for the week. One is on a dialectical approach to understanding communication. Another one is with the scholar Dr. Leslie Baxter, who developed relational dialectics, which is an important theory we're going over this week. And then the last one is on being and becoming Hawaiian and looking at how the Hawaiian culture and American culture intertwine and sometimes do not. You're also completing your midterm, which is an intercultural interaction essay you should have been working on for a couple weeks now, and you have weekly review number 4 due on Friday with your original post and your replies due on Sunday. As you look at the midterm, we went through this a couple weeks ago. Essentially, you should have already spent about 3 to 4 hours with a person from a group of a culture different from your own. So this is a intercultural interaction that you should have completed with somebody that lives and breathes in a different culture other than your own. That does not necessarily mean it has to be defined by ethnicity or race, just a different culture. So in that, you're supposed to talk to them, interview them about their culture, and then spend about 3 to 4 hours with them. This week you are now writing that essay. It's a 5 to 7 page reflective paper about this intercultural experience where you have participated in. You need to give a detailed description of the experience, a discussion of the history of the cultural group you interacted with, as well as some of their core values and assumptions within their cultural system. You also need to provide a discussion of how other cultures differ from your own and the implications for future interactions. You need to provide context with the interactions that occurred, include some core and critical intercultural or communication theories that may have influenced these interactions, and then applications you learned, skills and attitudes from this, and how you will utilize that understanding moving forward. It's important to include photos and make sure that this is 5 to 7 pages of written content. That does not include your cover page, abstract page, and your reference pages. So remember, it does need to be an APA format. If you've already completed your cultural experience, then you are good to go with this in writing it this week. Otherwise, you have a lot of work set for you if you've not done anything on this yet. Weekly review number 4 asks you to write a 500-word response no later than Friday on understanding what we can learn from the Hawaiian culture that is relative to the ideas of intercultural communication. You'll choose relational dialectics theories, or CMM, coordinated management of meaning, and look at how one of those 2 chosen theories relate to the understanding of communication with someone else from another culture, in particular within the Hawaiian culture, and things you've watched from that video. From the course readings and videos this week, you should be able to answer the question, how does one of these theories relate to communicative practices and dialogues with Hawaiians? Make sure you include at least 3 outside sources in your response. Post that no later than Friday, and then also respond to 2 students no later than Sunday. As you look at the ideas of relational dialectics set forth by Baxter and Montgomery, it's important to know that this is largely known as an interpersonal communication theory. So it's rooted, if you think about it from a tradition perspective, which we do in communication theory, it's rooted in interpersonal comm. It's rooted in the relationship and looking at things of that nature. What you'll find is, though, that even though this has its roots and was first developed as an interpersonal theory, it has strong implications for intercultural interactions and communication. Why is that? Because most of the time when we interact with different cultures, it's in an interpersonal setting. So you'll see that relational dialectics really focuses on the contradictions within a relationship. It really connects us with the idea that there are close personal ties and relationships that highlights some of the ideas we have with one another, but also when we have a close personal tie with someone and a close intimate relationship with them, we can often sometimes focus on the tensions, the struggles, and the interplay between contrary tendencies within our communication. It really focuses on defining communication patterns between relationship partners and looks at the dialectical tensions that happen from dialogue within a relationship. Essentially, Baxter and Montgomery have told us that um, that people experience internal tensions in their relationships and with others, and that this develops and is exacerbated by when it comes to people with different backgrounds. So familial, cultural, and societal issues between people within a relationship. That's where you can see the intercultural tie there. So if we're looking at interpersonal communication and people with in relationships with people just in general, we're not talking about it necessarily intimate romantic relationships, we're talking about friendships, co-workers, things of that nature. Baxter has found that internal tensions within those relationships typically develop and come to light when it's dealing with people from different backgrounds, familial, cultural, or societal. So communication patterns will influence the stability or instability in sustaining a relationship. Really, Baxter was noticed in saying that it's a simplification of the concept by posing opposites attract or birds of a feather flock together. Either and also the idea two's a company, three's a crowd, more the merrier. These contradictions experienced within these common proverbs are similar to those we experience within relationships as individuals. When making decisions, we give voice to multiple viewpoints and desires that often contradict each other. So what we look at is if we're looking at communication patterns that influence the stability or influence instability in sustaining a relationship, it's important to consider 4 concepts of in which that can occur. So communication will either positively or negatively influence a relationship that's dealing with relational dialectics. So this internal struggle between 2 people communicating from different backgrounds either occurs in one of 4 ways or multiple ways, but it has to have at least these 4. It could be 2 of the 4 or 3 of the 4, depending on the situation. So the first one is contradictions. This considers contradictory communication patterns, behaviors, and norms within a relationship. So you've grown up knowing that when you communicate with person A, you communicate with them this way. However, person A learned growing up that if you communicate with them that way, that is a negative way to communicate with them, and you don't understand that. So that's when contradictions occur within your communication patterns because of differences in societal norms, societal, cultural, or familial norms. So some type of contradiction, something that's contradictory within, creating cognitive dissonance within your communication with somebody else from a different background. Totality deals with when balance is restored in the communication patterns, behaviors, and norms within a relationship. So it's when you work through your contradiction. Process is when processes are developed and utilized to achieve totality and avoid contradictions. And then praxis is the concept of practicability and decision making within a relationship to maintain or achieve totality within a relationship. And so that's what that is. So the first thing that we learn is that relational dialectics begins with an internal struggle, which is a contradiction. The ultimate goal is to achieve totality or some type of praxis. So we utilize process and praxis to help us get through this idea to achieve some type of totality within our relational dialectic interactions and any type of particular relationship. One point of information that I wanted to point out from the course reading that's found on page 192 is the functionalist paradigm. What this particular figure shows us is that within this functionalist paradigm tradition, or the tradition of intercultural communication research, is that we're building on social science research, most notably within psychology and sociology, yes, but with an ultimate goal to sometimes and often describe and predict human behavior, interaction, and communication. So from this perspective, within this paradigm here in this graph, is that culture is often viewed as a variable defined by a prior group membership and many times on a national level. So if it's a variable, it means it's ever changing. So when we look at it from a functional perspective, we're looking at the functionality of culture within communication and intercultural research. We have to look at it in 3 ways. First, we look at the goal of the research, the disciplinary roots, the culture, and the relationship between culture and communication, and we determine what that is. Then we look at the functional, interpretive, critical humanist, and critical structuralist approaches that we can utilize within that research and be able to come through and draw out what we might be looking for from a communication perspective. And so with that, we need to include an emphasis on the stable and orderly characteristics of culture and the influence communication has on that, as well as the relationship between culture and communication, and the idea that relationship is frequently conceptualized as casual and deterministic, meaning that group members and related cultural patterns can theoretically predict behavior using a graphic or a table such as this. Really, though, research within this paradigm tends to focus on extending interpersonal communication theories to intercultural context, discovering theoretical-based cross-cultural differences in interpersonal communication. So what intercultural communication is doing is they're typically utilizing in their research interpersonal theories and then uncovering intercultural contexts that help discover a new theoretical base for a new theory or a hybrid version or extended version of this interpersonal theory to extend to intercultural interactions and communications. So that's really important. One thing I wanted to point out, they go over the critical humanist paradigm and the interpretive paradigm and things of that nature. I wanted to focus on the functionalist at this point for you where we're at. The last thing I want to go through and talk about is triangulation. It's really important that we start to understand this at this point in the course. And the reason for that is that you'll see as we're moving through a lot of these readings within this reader we have is that you'll see that most of the time they're using interpersonal or other types of communication theories in their research. And to do that, they have to utilize triangulation. This may be a concept you're familiar with or heard of, or it may not be, but I want to give you some context to this right now. Triangulation is the idea that you are utilizing multiple types of research to determine the validity of your qualitative research. So to determine validity in quantitative research, we do that in a number of ways from statistical analyses. In qualitative research, and specifically ethnography, to improve our accuracy and determine validity of our research, we utilize triangulation. This is where we take three types of research that must demonstrate the same or similar or close results of the study to determine our study being effective. So in the triangulation analysis triangle you see here, you see that somebody utilized online survey results, they utilized participant observation and in-depth interviews to create a triangulation of getting similar results to show validity in their study. Other types of ways you can achieve this is through field notes, interviews, and site documents. In a nutshell, qualitative researchers need to have more than one way, particularly 3 ways, to show how they arrived at their conclusions. So what you have to do is collect 3 types of evidence within qualitative research to determine its effectiveness. One by interviews, one through site documents to document to show what you have found, and another one through field notes or through participant observation or whatever it may be. Triangulation tells us that we learn more by observing from multiple perspectives than looking from one single perspective. You can see here my little comic on triangulation. It really helps you kind of understand it in more of a comical way. So you'll check Apple Maps, Google Maps, Bing Maps, and then you say, oh, boom, look, I'm triangulating. I've looked at 3 different maps to show the validity of my directions and being accurate and the best way to go through that. So that's a little kind of blurb that kind of helps you wrap your head around it. Essentially, most of the research that we're reading about in this in our course text is qualitative research. Some of you may utilize that or think about that when you get to your capstone at that point. However, it's important to realize and see that we need to utilize 3 types of research to determine our validity in that sense. Just to recap, we're in week 4, we're reading chapters 9 and 12. We're watching 3 videos that are related to the course context. We're completing our midterm and our weekly review on Friday with reply posts on Sunday. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I look forward to interacting with you. God bless.